originally the South African Horse Import-Export Council, which was the origins of trying to get South African exports going. And therefore, under that umbrella, we looked after the quarantine station, which I think if you want to look back at the 10 years or 11 years that I ran it for, 50% of the time we were suspended. We had a very good run from 2006 until 2011 when we had the Marmara outbreak, but prior to that we were suspended, and after that we were suspended. So, yes, I think that's fair to say that, we sat 50% of the time waiting for systems to change. On the trade side, of course, we had a very different role, trying to encourage investment in and grow our exports whichever way they went out of the country.
Well, we certainly got investment into this country. We've got various sheikhs from all over the world. We've got the Irish arriving. They all buy horses. They win races with South African bred horses on Met Day, and no one knows who they are, but they sort of carry on and have a bit of fun. And you've always brought up a slide on how it works. Now, I think we should go into that first, because once you go into those slides, people then will understand or maybe refresh their memories as to how this whole thing works.
Yeah, and I think just as a sort of a starting statement, I really represent the interests of trade on a national basis. We simply want a solution to allow our industry to grow. And therefore, I'm not taking forward a view of the TBA Council. These are my experiences having been involved in this business for the last 10 years. So I think it does go back to the starting point of international trade, which is the OIE. As we know, that slide will show that it's a government-backed body, 178 countries. They develop on each disease codes or guidelines or standards based to basically to facilitate trade. So they're wanting to enable trade to take place. So it's an advisory body, and they come up with recommendations. But the real key is that they want to facilitate safe international trade. And of course, the second part of that is the background, is that between countries themselves, they negotiate protocols. These are between trading partners, using the code as a base so that they can draw from that experience in order to make a decision as to whether the importation from a country is safe or not. And really, that boils down to a health certificate, which is a set of import conditions.
Right, then we move on to
Can we just stop there for a sec? Because I want to make a few additional points.
Why didn't you write them on the piece of paper so that we knew what was going on? Because people don't listen, they read.
Of course, and I think there's a huge amount of confusion between the code, the OIE code, which is the recommendation, versus the protocol. And as I say, code is a set of guidelines from which countries then can draw in terms of negotiating their protocol. And I think there's a grave danger that the world moves towards adopting the OIE code as a prescribed set of rules and therefore limiting the opportunity to negotiate. And there's a very good example that we currently have, whereas Mauritius, as a country importing South African horses primarily, is willing to deviate to a large extent away from the code in order to get horses into the country. Now, some might say that that's a bad example because they are taking far higher risks than they should be. Whereas on the other side of the coin, some countries will want South Africa to align themselves to the letter of the law when it comes to the code. So for me, the greatest concern is that the code, the OIE code, almost transplants the opportunity for countries to negotiate protocols. And that to me is something that we have to be extremely cautious about.
The code is what we live by. The code means that if there's an outbreak, we immediately quarantine ourselves from the rest of the world for X amount of months. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. The protocol, which is drawn up as a set of import conditions, let's use the EU as an example, which was ratified in 1997. Yes, they based their decision-making on the 1990 code. And based on an outbreak and their rules, if you were within 150 kilometers of your quarantine station, you were automatically shut down for 24 months, which we know has been the single biggest Achilles heel of the free zone concept. The shutting down for 24 months, 2 infectious cycles. And that was, I understand, based on the Barcelona Olympics, when they had that outbreak. It overwintered, or in fact, vaccinated horses using the live attenuated vaccine stimulated another outbreak. And therefore the world believed that in fact you had to have 2 infectious cycles to prove that the virus had eventually got out of the system. But in a South African context, where we know for a fact that this disease is seasonal, to have to sit through another high-risk season in order for you to apply to your trading partner, in this case the EU, to lift that suspension, unbundled our whole business model, our trading ability, we lost market share, and it was very difficult to recover.
I'm going to stop you there, because we had an interview with Professor Ian Sana, who's now in charge of protocols as far as this country is concerned, and codes.
Yeah.
And he was adamant that he has 4 pillars that he has to abide by and get through before we can change anything. Is he on the right track?
Well, look, let's go back to that export workshop strategy, of which we all attended. There was international representation from the scientific community, the veterinary community. We had Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, veterinary officials. And
so we had all the right people.
We had all the right people there. And the conclusion of that workshop was that, one, we had an existing free zone. Therefore, if we enhanced surveillance and movement controls, which had been largely absent for many, many years, and that's a political will issue. Ultimately, disease control is managed by your veterinary services. And then we took the next step of converting Kenilworth Quarantine Station, which was a partial vector-protected facility. In other words, it really enabled horses to come out during the day and exercise. But if you lock them up entirely, so you seal them from day 1 until the end of quarantine, you did all the exercise activities within that building, that might give importing countries more confidence to accept it. Plus, you've got your controlled area, so you know pretty much what's going on outside. I think it was a very sensible decision, because it did enable countries to say, well, South Africa's taking the next step, which is within the code, but adding on top of that surveillance within the controlled area. But that was and so of the 4 pillars, that was, let's say, 1 and 2. The third one was that they certainly recognized the value of locking horses down from within the infected country. So it could be in KZN, it could be Johannesburg, it could be Lagos, Nairobi, it didn't matter. Where you are infected, you lock the horses up for a period of time, and you can prove that you've locked them up and they haven't been exposed to Kulakodi's midge attack, and that you transfer them onto the aircraft in the same fashion, and that you arrive in the country of destination. That would satisfy the OIE. And then finally, I think the fourth thing that we needed to say was that the free zone concept could be moved to a place in the country where there was a far less likelihood of an outbreak, such as Springbok. Low midges, low horse movements, but no airport.
I just want to stop you there, because there seems to me this glaring void between the perceptions of the African horse sickness disease. Okay, we have supposed free areas, which are not actually free areas. Okay, they're not proven to be free. Kulakodi's midge, as they're called, can get into the free area and impregnate or whatever it does, bite a horse, and give it African horse sickness. No one can prove that, okay? And this seems to be a big stumbling block. Why don't we just say, we got African horse sickness in South Africa, the whole of South Africa, but we're prepared to put our horses into a lockup facility, which is vector protected, being accepted by everyone all over the world, put it in there for a certain amount of time, do the tests on it, and send it out of there. Make sure that it gets on the aeroplane having not been bitten by a midge. That's got to be the answer. Now, Professor Sana was not of that view.
And I think the primary, put up the next slide, Raymond, because that will show basically the 2 options that South Africa has. Okay. We know the free zone, it's worked for 17 years, 50% of the time we've been suspended. The alternative, which is locking horses up, accepting that you're infected, and then proving continuous vector protection until delivery in the country of destination, which exists in the code. And if you
it does exist in the code, you say?
It does exist in the code. It's I think chapter 12.1.7.
12.17. Can I read it out here?
Yeah.
For a period of at least 14 days, and an agent identification test was carried out with negative results on the blood sample collected not less than 14 days after introduction into a vector-protected establishment, or for a period of at least 40 days, and were vaccinated at least 40 days before shipment against all stereotypes where presence in the source population has been demonstrated through a surveillance program in accordance with Articles 12.1.12 and 12.1.13, and were identified in the accompanying certification as having been vaccinated. So those are the 2 points. The one point is that it's a 14-day with a
the
PCR,
use of the PCR
test, okay? This is written into this code, and this code, if I may show you, is there. It's in black and white. Why aren't we going on that route?
Look, it's a publicly available document, so people can get onto the website of the OIE and draw it off for themselves. The greatest concern of the community who believes that we need to be pursuing with, let's say, the Western Cape structure in a different form is that there are no apparent countries that are willing to accept horses out of that on that basis.
I must stop you there. Are there no countries? Because the feedback we hear, and certainly Engelberg Bridges' letter, says they want to find solutions. The UAE, I am certain, from what I've heard, want to find solutions. If this is a solution, are there no countries that want to go this route?
Well, if you look at, for example, the International Movement of Horses Committee, which effectively is the subcommittee of the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities around the world. That is made up largely of, let's say, the new world, the old world, EU-based, the Americas, Australia, for example, the old established countries. But the world has changed. I mean, there are huge developments in equestrian industries around the world. You talk of Kazakhstan, potentially China down the line. You've got, just to name a few, the Middle East, which has got much more flexibility perhaps than the old established systems. Many of the older countries are very much EU aligned in their thinking. EU current philosophy is to prove that you can do all your pre-export requirements out of a free area. In order for the EU to change, they will have to basically replace their legislation, which allows for them a little bit more flexibility. We don't know when that's going to happen. So I'm saying to you, let's use as a very good example the USA, which for 60 years has been importing horses from Africa on the reversal of the lockdown, where they take care of the horses post-arrival. But they require no pre-export testing. They have no en route protection of their horses when they stop for refueling. Post-arrival at JFK Airport, there's no fly screens or anything on top of the jet stores, if they have any. They're really interested in what happens once those horses are in quarantine. What the alternative recommendation of the OIE is that you reverse that and you do it pre-export. And really what you're saying is that you're proving two things. One, that you have continuous vector protection at all times until delivery. And secondly, that you're testing the horses with the best possible diagnostic test. And we believe that we're very close to a validated PCR test, which will then reduce the quarantine time to 14 days. We've said that so many times.
We've been close to this validated PCR test for a number of years, 2 or 3 years. Why haven't we got it?
Look, there have been numerous adjustments in terms of the code. There's a commission within the code that looks after certain testing. And that, the goalposts have moved somewhat. I don't think it's worth going down that debate, as long as we get the test validated that we can use as an internationally prescribed test. Then we can move forward to the reducing quarantine time. But the truth of the matter is, the USA have adopted this very methodology without any of the concerns that the majority of countries appear to be showing or expressing, which is the biggest risk as I can see it. I think it's very easy to develop a high-class facility with all the scientific methodologies of proving positive pressure, transferring horses from the end of quarantine onto the aircraft. So you've had a bubble, you now need to create another bubble, which is the transferring onto the aircraft. Once the doors are sealed on the aircraft, that's another bubble until you arrive in the country of destination. So for me, if Qatar can develop an indoor sporting complex with all the bells and whistles in terms of air conditioning and controls, you don't think South Africa can build a lockdown facility that can house between 50 and 100 horses with the modern technology that's available to us within the precinct of an airport. As I mentioned earlier, the airport could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be KZN. There happens to be political will within the KZN government.
Which is, just to stop you there, because people out there don't really know what you're talking about, but there is a very big move afoot.
Yes.
In KZN to build this facility near the airport, obviously, and be able to export horses if we can get these protocols changed.
Absolutely. If you can find...
But Peter, just to go back one step, because I must ask you this question. For 10 years, okay, you sat on this council. And for 10 years, I remember sitting here and having this discussion with you 4 years ago, okay, and I asked you why we don't use the American system. Surely that's the right system. And at that date, we didn't have the problem that we have now, where if you send in a colt, it's got to cover a mare for 3 times or something because there's some type of infectious...
CM,
yeah. Okay, so that wasn't the problem, but we weren't keen to go that route then. Now we're suddenly keen to go that route. Why the change around?
I think there were 2 things. One, the 2011 Marmara outbreak, followed by the 2013 outbreak, followed by the 2014 outbreak, all in the Western Cape, followed by an EU inspection which really didn't show South Africa's controls in a very good light. And I'm talking surveillance, I'm talking movement control. Don't forget, you've got to manage an entire province virtually.
Oh, you've got to manage the whole Cape Horn.
We have been to the highest level in government in the Western Cape, who to date have not shown any practical desire to implement systems which are needed. Roadblocks, Metro Police stopping horse boxes, a proper surveillance system with testing and funding that comes with it.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine you arrive with your polo ponies you've been playing in Vicksburg, okay, and the guy arrives and stops you in the road and says, now, where's all your papers?
And I don't mean to...
And where do you think the papers are? Well, you know, 100 Rand could get you through the roadblock. You know.
James,
so
I don't mean to decry.
What good is that?
I don't mean to decry the efforts that were put in place originally. And on a desktop plan, it obviously looked really, really good. But what has happened is that the Western Cape has grown its horse population from 6,000 to 15,500, according to the last census that we undertook on behalf of the government. So it is not as though the horse population and movements are going to remain stable. They're going to increase, if anything else. The reality of the matter is that we're infected. And we are infected from top to bottom, whether we like it or not. So the only practical way forward for me is to use the code to negotiate at a grassroots level with our trading partners, to really partner them in making sure that the building, the transfer onto the aircraft, the management of the aircraft en route is done in a proper and safe method, exactly as the OIE code recommends. Safe international trade. And I do believe that the KZN government, I have provided background support. It is something that I believe that the TBA members will benefit from, and I've addressed it with council. They don't necessarily endorse this at all, but they recognize the importance of continuing, because for the first time we've got political will to find a solution. As I said, it could be anywhere, this facility. It happens to be that the KZN government...
And you're well down the road with this.
We've had a meeting with the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, who has really instructed veterinary services to find a solution so that they can take it forward as an alternative solution to the Western Cape. We have no interest in stopping what's happening in the Western Cape. But at the same time, I think we should be looking very practically and pragmatically at a viable alternative, because the world is a different place. And I believe that there should be, if the USA have imported horses for 60 years and never introduced horse sickness, with no pre-export testing from infected areas such as Johannesburg, in the middle of summer, why on earth are we so reticent to believe in our own assistance in South Africa?
I know you're obviously a very good politician, but this point has been brought up all the way along this discussion. This discussion's been going on for many years. I know that I've been involved in the forefront of these discussions, and it's always been the same. We've got to have the free zone, and that's the way we're going to do it, and we've got to have road maps and all these type of things, because we need to know what the situation is. The other side of the coin, and this is now starting to come through very, very strongly from all people in the industry, to hell with all that. Let us make ourselves an infected area, because we're trying to make ourselves a non-infected area in some place. Make an infected area and set up a situation whereby we can export horses, having put them into a non-infected facility, guaranteed non-infected. It makes perfect sense.
You're on. Look, for me, I see it clearly. As I say, I saw the damage that we were 10 days away from shipping a full shipment of 33 horses to Europe in 2011. Probably worth 50 to 60 million. 10 days away from shipping, we had the outbreak, we were shut down for 24 months. You know what the damage to our trade is? That is it is hard to explain the damage, both from a local perspective as well as your trading partners, your staff that are suddenly facing this financial cliff, as it were. I do believe that we should be seriously looking at finding trading partners to work with us. And if you take a vision,
on the
James,
lockdown facility,
logistics is often forgotten in the whole mix. If you take a vision of what should happen, let's assume that you have a hub in the Middle East, which is the central point. You can disperse them whichever way you want. You lock them down here for your 14 days. You transport them in a bubble to your next holding facility.
Correct. And then
who holds them in the same health status.
Do tests again.
Do all the testing again. They spend another 14 days or 20 days, and you disperse them thereafter. Some will stay in the Middle East. Some will go on to Singapore. To me, that's the vision we should be pursuing. Because it's practical.
Talk about, obviously, what's going on from the TBA side of it.
James, it's a new role. Breed affairs has always been part of the TBA's mix, but it has never really been pushed hard or focused on specifically. And I think that the whole TBA structure is evolving. Kevin is focusing on getting all the systems right. You know, we've had a decade or two of running the business in a very old-fashioned way, to put it kindly. So Kevin is focusing on getting systems. I think he's doing a great job, and ensuring that that the business is taken care of in the right fashion. So that's on that side. My side is breed affairs, and as I say, I've just recently had the pleasure and privilege of going around the country, visiting all the breeders who had nominated or entered horses on the National Yearling Sale. I'm going to complete the other studs that didn't have any on, and eventually gathering thoughts as to what really breeders want. But for me, it's simply defined as is ensuring the sustainability and improvement of the business of breeding thoroughbreds in South Africa. And of course, we have international links, we have industry links, we have government links. So all of those factors or those issues will be packaged into an evolving role as time goes on. But I think there will eventually be a clear distinction between sales, which Kevin Woolward, with his corporate and financial background, and his team will manage, and I will look after breed affairs. There will obviously be some crossover, but really we want to make sure that thoroughbred breeding is able to grow as it should do in this incredible country.
We breed top horses. That's a fact. Do you think we will, in the near future, be able to get our top horses easily out this country? I always finish with a question because I think it is the only question worth answering.
For me, if you look at the way racing's going, which is not growing participation as we knew it, and we've spoken about it, unless there's a miraculous decision to transplant the Hong Kong Jockey Club model into South Africa, we will continue to rely on exports to generate or realize the value of our thoroughbreds. And as I say, having enjoyed, being part of looking at the whole country, you can understand why we have bred such incredible horses. The diversity from the Karoo to the Western Cape, which is run on a much smaller basis, to the KZN environment, Port Elizabeth. I mean, it's incredible diversity and incredible skills that our horsemen have developed. And really, that is a legacy that we need to hold on to and grow. And not forgetting that racing and thoroughbred breeding is only a small sector of this much bigger equestrian industry. So South African equestrian industry can significantly grow if we can internationalize and gain new markets.
Peter, it's always been a pleasure chatting to you. You're a font of information. As I say, you're probably one of the best political people in racing. And congratulations on your winner yesterday. Nice to see you and your partners.
We're not going to breed with her, by the way.
You're not exporting it either.
She'll be exported to a polo field shortly.
But well done on her. And nice to see your continued participation, and we wish you all the best in your future. We know that this is going to be not an easy road, and we hope that you put it together, because